every great story, great movie contains some sort of thematic lessons, a lesson or multiple lessons that the character learns through their journey. Thematic lessons aren't necessarily spelt out, but something learned as the story unfolds. My partner Gabe and I are discussing themes specific to leadership from some of our favorite movies, starting with one of the greatest movies of all times, in our opinion at least, Star Wars, specifically Episode 4, A New Hope. So Gabe, what did you find? What did you see?
Man, I saw so many things, and of course, like every time you watch it, you see sometimes a different angle, and but as you said, like Star Wars is such a huge franchise, and it's an example of cinematic mastery, and the difference between this one and anything that's been done before and even after is that it has as you said, like several actually themes that can be related to a hero and an anti-hero and the leadership in general. Because if we just jump in, it's about the leadership of the galaxy on one hand, right? It's the empire, the emperor and the structure that wants to overcome somehow the democratic structure, right? The leadership of the galaxy, and they are undermining how it works, and they're trying to do everything they can to just destroy the orderly, let's say, type of democratic system, right?
Right.
So this is like the major theme of all the like the over theme of all the episodes, right? The battle between the emperor structure and the democratic structure that trying to manage the galaxy, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting they use those extremes, right? They use that it's heroes and villains, it's good and bad, it's light and dark side. I mean, it's just the extremes are there of like that extreme comparison. I mean, I agree, like that's the major thing that you just see, this kind of difference in really how the universe is being governed in a sense, and that strategy of taking over the universe, and the other side actually trying to prevent that.
It's like a balance in leadership, like you think about it, like opposing parties trying to get the leadership of a country, right? Or a government.
Well, and the thing that really stood out for me, I will say this, and this is, I think, the huge thing for me, and this kind of speaks to my thoughts and my vision, my view on leadership in general. Darth Vader and the Empire lead with that fear. They mandate orders. They expect that blind loyalty. They deliver that punishment and retribution. And what was crazy is they do that for both adversaries, like the people that are against, and their allies, like people that are on the same side. To the point where Vader will use the Force to choke you out if you speak out against him, right? Or make a mistake or something like that's like the ultimate of like leadership by punishment. It's this tyrannical kind of authoritarian leadership that we all experience, and we kind of fear. It's and you're scared of that. I mean, it made it scary. I remember seeing it as a little kid, and it was scary from both sides, right? Doesn't matter if you were for or against him, you were scared of Darth Vader and the Empire, and eventually learn later the Emperor's like approach to leadership. I mean, it's not someone you celebrate on like Boss's Day or anything like that. You know what I mean?
For sure. So it's amazing what you just mentioned about Darth Vader and the fear-based leadership, because I think they are very interconnected. So first of all, what you mentioned, that the fear is not only um, deployed towards the adversary, but also within the team, their own team. It's very relevant to some of the, let's say, old school leadership that's been
Right.
happening, like for the
Right.
majority of our history, let's say in leadership and in business, also corporations and stuff. Of course, not to this extreme, but still, like not let's say a modern type of leadership that we see in fortunately in many companies today.
Right.
And on the other hand, you look at the rebels, let's say, and all the other structures in the universe. They're mostly collective. You don't have a like a one leader, right? It's a very democratic and collective leadership. There's not only one person who's deciding, but all the people in a democratic structure. And this is very interesting. And the second thing that I want to piggyback on what you said on fear is the Death Star, which is, I think, it's like the ultimate manifestation of the fear, right? Like you create this monster tool, a weapon after all, and you just destroy planets, like entire planets with it. And I think this is a very vivid, manifestation of the fear-based leadership. Like you don't like something, you just destroy it, and you're not working with it. You're not asking, for feedback. You're not
Right.
having conversations, but you just destroy it.
Wipe
And
them
of
out.
course, just to finalize this idea, like I love Darth Vader, not because of his like bad character, but like he's the ultimate villain character, and his personality and his charisma is incredible, even though like he's a bad guy, right? but
Yeah. I mean,
but nobody until today, in my opinion, there is no other movie who succeeded in, or theme who created similar, not even like distant, similar in charisma and power as Darth Vader. I don't see any. I don't know how you think about this.
well, and it's interesting you say that. I mean, and this is more just the genius of the movie is that they did such a great job of making the 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 dark side and the Empire and Darth Vader and all of them collectively with the Empire just look cool. Like they, they had the cool looking suits. They had, I mean, everything looked cool. Like I honestly, when I was a kid, I had strange ambitions. I wanted to be, when you would ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would say I wanted to be a stormtrooper or a red-tailed hawk. For some reason, I wanted to be a hawk, which neither of them came true. But yeah, I mean, the stormtrooper just looks cool, even though he couldn't shoot. He probably didn't have much a good life, as a stormtrooper. It still looked really cool, and you wanted to be a part of that. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting how there's that side of a tyrant or a leader, or even somebody who is maybe stepped on a lot of people to become successful, right, and hurt a lot of people, and not really probably the best of leader, but they're highly successful, and they make it look sexy, they make it look awesome, you know what I mean? And people want that, right? They want that power. And this, of course, Darth Vader is to the extreme, but they want that power of and money and wealth and all those things, and people start to chase that. And there's this, in this case, they're chasing the power side, which is
On the other hand, going forward with your idea, if you think about the two sides, let's say, okay, the dark side and all the other people in it, and the light, the bright side and the light side. If you think about it, like most of the characters in the dark side didn't seem happy, right? They seem like grumpy or angry all the time. But the rebels, even though they're like the weak side, let's say, because they're not as powerful as the dark side, or at least their weapons, they look more happy, like more
having fun. I mean,
fun, and
absolutely.
and they're laughing a lot, and you know. So if you think about in terms of what the two sides of the leadership project, like the powerful one and direct one, and you know, you can somehow want that, but you don't want that because, you know, people are angry and grumpy and mean all the time. But the other ones who are not, they don't have the ultimate power on their own, or one person, but they seem like happy. And
Absolutely.
so it's also, as you mentioned at the beginning, like the dark side and the light side, it's always like a very interesting a balancing act between them. And you
Yeah.
know.
Well, he does such a great job of I mean, it's just such an extreme contrast. Something that, you know, and this is kind of where I was speaking again, my thoughts on leadership, where I go and where I always try to impose when I've done leadership training and trying to encourage is, you know, these thoughts of being a supportive leader and servant leadership. By comparison, the leadership of the Rebel Alliance and Obi-Wan are as far from, you know, opposite as you can get with that. I mean, the stark difference that really stands out to me is, like you said, it's that collaboration and that unity between the rebels, regardless of their roles. There's a feeling of it being very flat structure, you know, where it's we're all appreciating the unique strengths and talents of each member. They work together. Everyone has value and a voice, even to the point where, you look at even things like the other extra kind of characters, even the droids, you know, the droids on the rebel side have a voice. Like they actually have a voice. They participate, they're listened to, they partake in the conversation, versus there's none of that on the dark side, right? You see these kind of contrasting droids that look kind of similar, but they don't have much to say, and if they do, it just sounds very evil, but you don't know what it is. There's also this Wookiee, you know, that only really Han Solo can understand, but he's part of the conversation. You know, he has a voice that people listen to. So it's just very interesting that I love that idea that they have this kind of flat, communicative, supportive structure where we're all in this together.
That's amazing, and this very flat, and I call it collective kind of leadership. It's so obvious in the rebel side, and as you mentioned, even the droids, not only they have a role, but they have an important actually role. Like R2D2, he's carrying the plans to destroy the Death Star, right? So
right.
So even the small, let's say, apparently non-important pawns, right, in the rebel side, they step up and they have a meaningful role, and they have a purpose. And also, as you mentioned, Obi-Wan, which is very important in this first episode, A New Hope, because you can see and speaking of purpose, you can see like he's giving up his life to help them escape. So this is also like a very powerful metaphor for collective leadership and teamwork. Like, hey, I'm giving everything so the others can can succeed, and it's very powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah, the fact that he's the ultimate sacrifice for mentoring his kind of new mentee, if you will, and his team, his group, and for certain Vader or no one on the other side would give that kind of sacrifice for this larger purpose. That's the thing. There's Obi-Wan is clearly a leader, right? But he takes more of this kind of mentor teacher kind of role, allowing for Luke and the others to kind of learn as they go. The other person too that has kind of a leadership role, but it's again has that flat dimension to it where they're all on the same team was Leia. Even though she's a royal princess and kind of considered that, she's not it's not like respect my authority kind of princess, right? She demands more of a level of class and kind of professionalism from Han Solo, and she's kind of annoyed by him, but he's not, because he's not being that. But she's looking for, really what she's looking for is initiative, and most important, which was purpose. And I think those great leaders, those leaders that have that kind of supportive servant leadership approach, they really push that idea of purpose and having a why. And clearly the rebels have a reason for that, why, I guess.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like both Obi-Wan and Leia, as you mentioned, like if you step back in time, if you think about it, like Obi-Wan was just retired, right? Before R2-D2 and Luke came into play, he was just retired in the mountains, right? And he didn't have any meaningful role at that point. But when he saw that something is about to happen that can really change the history and the balance of powers, he stepped up. So he, went out of retirement and took an active role, as you said, as a mentor and as to, let's say, give leverage to the others, even though he was like retired, right? But he did that, and also ultimately he gave his life for this. And this is a very good example of, as you said, servant leadership and collective leadership and mentorship that I would hope like most of the companies are developing this type of leaders nowadays, because it's the most purposeful and also I think it's mostly practical after all to do this. And Leia, as you mentioned as well, she's a princess, but she doesn't act like a fancy princess, just like a diva, but she acts like she demands, as you said, professionalism and commitment after all, and purpose from the other ones to do what her mission was, which is to deliver the plans to the rebel leadership so they can destroy the very bad weapon. So she's just committed to the goal and to the purpose, and the only demands that she's claiming is because of that and towards that.
Right. She sees that larger outcome, that purpose, right? And she's trying to move them for that. So she expects them to still do what they need to do, which is what you want out of a good leader. You want a leader to value everybody's strengths and roll their sleeves up and be in there, support, be a part of that, jump into the trenches. But you also want that leader to again hold people accountable to that larger outcome. And so there's a scene that stood out to me where the rebels, they're discussing their plans to attack the Death Star, right? And like you said, the Death Star is kind of this ultimate symbol of evil, or the powerful businesses, or whatever you want to call it. And but this scene of the rebels having their discussion, they have this free discussion, allowing for feedback and questions. They kind of make a request or a plea for participation. They're not just barking orders. They're asking for people's input, and they're hearing it. It's most important that they speak to inspire with purpose. Again, they have this purpose of why we're doing this, and these sacrifices that people have already made. And so, and that's really what you want out of leadership when they're having a discussion is, here's our problem. Here's our plan to overcome, our solution. Who's down to contribute? What role are you willing to take? And that's kind of what you want out of a good meeting or a good discussion or project management, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's crazy that this kind of projected type of leadership, because I don't think any company or at least corporation back in the 80s was doing this. I'm almost 100% sure that there wasn't such collective and flat leadership back then. But
Right.
the thing is that as I was looking at the two, you can see the two kind of meetings, right? Let's say executive meetings, right? You see that the dark side meeting with all the generals around the table, and there is a circular setup, but there is no dialogue, that everybody's barking and they are demanding attention and so on. So there is no collective purpose on and collaboration within them. But then you see also that the circular setup from the rebels, and you see, as you mentioned, everybody's jumping in and offering to help and volunteering, and and this is something that I'm using for team coaching, for example, a setup that is trying to bring on all the team members with a volunteer type of approach. And it's crazy, like somebody thought about this like 40 years ago, but
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, all the lessons were there for us,
yeah.
and we just didn't we all saw it. We were like, as kids, we were like, that's how you're supposed to do it. And you're wishing for that. And then you go into the corporate world and it's not like that. And
Yeah,
you're wondering why. You're like, why is this so, why are we acting like the Empire when we should be acting like the Rebel Alliance?
exactly.
It's really interesting. So I know, and I'm curious about this. I tried to just look and see, do a little research, not much, but I mean, I know George Lucas, he studied and drew from a great deal of storytelling theories, myths and all of that, and really tried to pull from how you tell stories and those approaches. And he created possibly one of the most epic stories or fictional universes ever made. And I wonder if George pulled from any leadership theories. There's an old one from the 50s that I still believe in this in a great deal. There's a theory, Douglas McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y, which basically describes two distinct kind of leadership styles and how to motivate. Theory X being this kind of style that you believe all workers are kind of lazy and you need to take this authoritarian kind of approach and you don't trust them, right? And the Theory Y manager manages with trust and believes that everybody has internally has a desire to do well and that kind of thing. And so you can see that same kind of concept going on here. I don't know. I'm just really curious with George Lucas, if he even went into that or just this was just kind of something that came out of storytelling, but it feels like he was definitely on way beyond the rest of us. Like you said, most companies now are barely starting to kind of move towards this approach of being more of a rebel alliance and getting away from the Empire approach.
Yeah, and alliances in general, if you will, because the more you consider the people in a company as allies and the team members as allies and not competitors, the more you can develop bigger goals and the more you can commit to them and support the team members to commit to those goals, because they are over the individual goals. And these superordinate goals, how they are called, they're always winning all, like, against any kind of conflict, internal conflict, and there is also an experiment back in the 50s or 60s, I think. It's the caveman experiment, where a scientist put together two groups of teenagers, boys, and they gave them, first of all, reasons to like hate each other and have grudges against each other, and then they try to see how they can solve that. And the only option to solve that is when they gave them a superordinate goal that both, let's say both teams needed to work together in order to achieve them. And they forgot about every all the grudges and any differences between them. And this is what's happening when you act like the Rebel Alliance, right? Of course,
Right.
there's always different perspectives or opposite views on things, but when you give them like a superordinate goal as like destroying the Death Star because otherwise we would die, then nothing else is more important than that. And
Right.
that's why they work together so well.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's kind of the theme you see in most sci-fi's, right? Like in general, there's always this kind of larger threat, and all of a sudden now we're going beyond the whatever differences we had before, whether it be, you know, race or ethnicity or cultural or country or whatever it may be, region. You know, we all bond together against this larger threat. So absolutely, the alliance there has this larger purpose for all of them to contribute and work together. It's pretty amazing.
And I think the reason why, like the top grossing movies of all time are mostly sci-fi is exactly because of that. Because people need to think of a goal which is larger than any kind of individual type of goal, or, you know, those, let's say, personal type of aspirations regarding money, power, and other stuff, which become meaningless when it comes to such a threat that, you know, endangers life on Earth. And you see like all the people, all the countries, and everybody that's currently in any kind of war with each other, they're on the same board. You know, like, hey, we need to get this done because we are not going to exist anymore if we don't.
Right. All that stuff really doesn't matter at the end of the day when you know, when everybody's life is threatened, the whole world is threatened.
Exactly. And that's why I think because people intrinsically, we want to belong to such a goal, but because of many other reasons which I'm not going to get into, we are kind of distracted by this stupid, you know, and meaningless differences like race, color, sex, and all the other stuff, which are really, we're just invented. They're not real limitations. They are not. They are not supposed to be. And I think they're not meant to put distance between us, but on the contrary, get us together and learn from each other. Because where is the wealth in, you know, and the most knowledge and growth and learning coming from exchanging, you know, ideas and getting together in communities? That's how the human race evolved after all.
Right. It's interesting you say that too. In Star Wars, you see that with the Rebel Alliance, and I think you see it more as the future episodes come up, but you see this collaboration and connection and value, regardless of the species, or I don't even know what you call it, but the origin of you know, that obviously a Wookiee and a human are very different from each other in a lot of different ways. You don't see that as much really in the Empire. It's all humans for the most part. I mean, there is some other eventually in some of the other episodes or other I don't even know what you call them, but not races, but I don't know what they are. But anyways, so it's just very interesting. You point that out that there is just that much more collaborative feel to that extreme where, you know, that they can see beyond and value each other regardless of where they're from.
Yeah, and I think it's racist too, because if you think about it, the Empire are mostly white. I didn't see any black or Asian or whatever. Right? So, and if you look at it, it looks like a fascist kind of state, right? And
it does.
And, you know, the uniforms and the black and if you go further to the other episodes, you're gonna see even more like they look like really fascist,
right?
And white supremacists. So, and on the other hand, all the rebels are like all the colors and the species in the universe, and they get along without any problem because they have this superordinate goal that they want to achieve together, and
Right.
nothing else matters. So.
Right. Yeah. They all value each other. Please subscribe and check out our other videos. Thanks for watching.